The auction block smelled like sweat and old rope. Caleb Thorne stood at the back of the crowd, hat pulled low, watching men bid on land they'd never worked and cattle they'd never branded. The auctioneer's voice rang sharp through the summer heat, calling out parcels like they were playing cards in a saloon game. Next lot, the Brennan Ranch. 200 acres, creek runs through it, barn still standing. Starting bid, $1. The crowd went silent. Caleb's head lifted. $1 for 200 acres. Something was wrong. No one moved. The auctioneer shifted his weight, sweat darkening his collar. Come on now, gentlemen. Good land. Creek never runs dry. $1 to start. Still nothing. Caleb's boots scraped dirt as he stepped forward. $1. The auctioneer's eyes snapped to him, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face, relief, maybe, or warning. Sold to the man in the back. Brennan Ranch goes to, he paused. Your name, sir? Caleb Thorne. A murmur rolled through the crowd. A few men turned to look at him, their expressions unreadable. One older man with a grey beard shook his head slowly and walked away. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Deed'll be ready tomorrow. You can take possession immediately. He said it quickly, like he wanted Caleb gone before anyone changed their mind. Caleb paid his $1, took the handwritten receipt, and left the courthouse square. Behind him, he heard whispers start up like wind through dry grass. The ride out to the Brennan Ranch took 2 hours. The land opened up slow and quiet, rolling hills, scattered oak, the kind of country that could hold cattle or break a man's back trying. The creek ran clear where the trail crossed it, just like the auctioneer said. But when Caleb crested the last rise and saw the ranch house, his gut tightened. The barn was standing, but only just. The roof sagged in the middle, and the doors hung crooked on rusted hinges. The house was worse, windows dark, porch boards rotted through in places, weeds growing up through the steps. No smoke from the chimney, no horses in the corral, no life. Caleb dismounted and tied his horse to the fence post. The wind moved through the valley, carrying the smell of dust and something older, abandonment, maybe grief. He walked toward the house, boots loud on the wooden steps. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. "Hello," his voice echoed. No answer. He pushed the door open. The inside was dim, sunlight cutting through gaps in the walls. Furniture still stood in place, a table, 2 chairs, an iron stove cold and dark. Dust covered everything like a shroud. And then he heard it. A sound, faint, from the back of the house. Caleb's hand moved to the revolver at his hip, fingers resting on the grip. He crossed the room slowly, stepping over a fallen picture frame, glass shattered across the floor. The sound came again, a scrape, metal on wood. He reached the doorway to what must have been a bedroom. The door was halfway closed. He pushed it open with his boot. And froze. A woman sat on the floor in the corner, her back against the wall. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, dirt smudged across her cheek. Her wrists were bound in front of her with old rope, frayed and stained. Her ankles were tied too, pulled tight to an iron ring bolted into the floorboards. She didn't look up when the door opened. She just stared at the floor, her hair hanging loose and tangled around her face. "Don't," she whispered. Her voice was raw, like she'd been screaming. "Don't look at me like this." Caleb's breath caught. He took a step back, instinct telling him to leave, to walk away from whatever hell this was, but his feet didn't move. "Who did this to you?" She didn't answer. Her hands trembled where they rested in her lap, fingers curled tight. Caleb knelt down slowly, keeping his distance. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just bought this place at auction. Didn't know anyone was still here." Her head lifted then, just enough for him to see her face. Her eyes were gray, sharp despite the exhaustion, and there was something else in them, not hope, suspicion. "You bought it," she said flatly. "For how much?" $1. She laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. $1, of course. She looked away again. "Then I guess you own me too." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I didn't buy you, I bought land." "Land and everything on it," she said. That's how it works, isn't it? That's what the deed says, property and contents. She spat the last word like poison. Caleb stood, pulling his knife from his belt. The woman flinched, pressing herself harder against the wall. I'm cutting the ropes, he said quietly. That's all. He moved toward her, slow and steady, like approaching a spooked horse. He knelt beside her and slipped the blade under the rope at her wrists. The fibers parted with a soft snap. She pulled her hands free immediately, rubbing at the raw skin where the rope had been. Eaten deep. Caleb cut the rope at her ankles next. When he finished, he stepped back, giving her space. She didn't move, just sat there, staring at her freed hands like she didn't believe it. What's your name? Caleb asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, barely audible, Nora. Nora Brennan. Her eyes flicked up to his, sharp again. Yes. Caleb nodded slowly, pieces starting to fall into place. This was your family's ranch. She pushed herself to her feet, unsteady, leaning against the wall. Before the bank took it, before they sold it for taxes, before, she stopped, her jaw working like she was biting back words that would cut too deep. Before what? She looked at him then, really looked at him, searching his face for something. Before my father shot himself in that barn out there, and my brother disappeared, and the Lord decided I wasn't fit to inherit because I'm a woman alone with no husband. Her voice was flat, empty, so they added me to the deed, property and contents, just like I said. Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. Who did this? Who tied you up? The auctioneer's men said they'd come back after the sale, said whoever bought the place could decide what to do with me. She wrapped her arms around herself. I heard them talking. They thought maybe no one would bid, thought they'd have the place to themselves. Caleb's hand tightened on the knife handle. How long have you been here? 3 days. She looked toward the window where the sun was starting to dip lower. Maybe 4. I stopped counting. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Caleb slipped the knife back into his belt. You're not property, and I'm not leaving you here. Nora's expression didn't change. Everyone says that, at first. I mean it. Sure, she turned away from him, moving toward the door on unsteady legs. I'll be gone by morning. You won't even know I was here. Caleb watched her go, watched the way she held herself together with nothing but will and spite. And he knew, standing there in that ruined house, that walking away wasn't something he could do. Not this time. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose boards on the porch. And somewhere in the distance, a rider's silhouette appeared on the ridge, watching. Nora made it as far as the porch before her legs gave out. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, his hands firm on her arms. She tried to pull away, but she didn't have the strength. He guided her back inside, into one of the chairs at the table. You need water, he said. I need to leave. You'll die before you make it a mile. He found a tin cup on the shelf, shook the dust out of it, and went to the pump outside. The handle screeched as he worked it, rust flaking off, but eventually water sputtered out, cold and clear. When he came back inside, Nora was staring at the table, her fingers tracing a carving in the wood. Letters. Initials, maybe. Caleb set the cup in front of her. Drink. She did slowly, like she'd forgotten how. He pulled the other chair out and sat across from her. I'm not turning you out, and I'm not leaving you here for those men to come back. Then what? Her voice was hoarse. You want me to thank you, play the grateful rescued woman. I want you to tell me the truth. She looked up, eyes narrowed. About what? About why no one in that town would bid on this place, about why they sold it for $1. He leaned forward. About what really happened here. Nora set the cup down, her jaw tight. You want the story? Fine. My father, Thomas Brennan, fought for the Union, came home after the war and tried to hold on to this place. But the taxes kept going up, and the land office kept changing the rules. Then a man named Holland showed up, said he had a legal claim to half our water rights, said my father owed him for supplies during the war. Did he? No, her voice hardened. Holland made it up, forged the documents, but he had friends in the county office, and my father didn't. So Holland got his claim, and when we couldn't pay the taxes without selling cattle we couldn't water without access to the creek, the bank foreclosed. Caleb's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened on the edge of the table. My father went to the land office one last time, Nora continued, tried to argue his case. They laughed him out of the building, told him he should have died in the war if he couldn't handle coming home. She paused, her breath shaking. He went to the barn that night. I found him the next morning. The silence was heavy. "And your brother?" Caleb asked quietly. Daniel, he tried to fight it, went to confront Holland directly. Nora's voice dropped. "He never came back. Holland said he never showed up. The sheriff said Daniel probably just ran off, couldn't handle the shame." She looked at Caleb then, her eyes burning. "But I know my brother, he wouldn't run." Caleb sat back slowly, so. Mething cold settling in his gut. Holland, first name Henry. Nora's expression shifted. "You know him." Caleb didn't answer right away. His mind was back in another place, another time. A camp outside Shiloh, mud and blood and men dying in the dark. He'd been a quartermaster's assistant, barely 18, tasked with keeping supply records. And he'd seen Henry Holland, seen him falsifying requisitions, skimming supplies to sell on the side, seen him forge an officer's signature to cover his tracks. Caleb had reported it, written it up, handed it to his commanding officer. Nothing happened. Holland had connections. The officer told Caleb to keep his mouth shut if he wanted to make it home alive. And Caleb had. He'd stayed silent, kept his head down, survived. But Holland hadn't stopped, not during the war and not after. "I know him," Caleb said finally. His voice was flat. "I knew what he was, and I did nothing." Nora stared at him. "What?" "During the war, I saw him stealing, forging documents. I reported it, but he had friends, and I didn't," and he stopped, the words bitter in his mouth. "I let it go, told myself it wasn't my fight." Nora's expression shifted from confusion to something harder. "You knew." "Yes." "And you didn't stop him." "No." She stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. "So you're just like the rest of them. You knew he was dirty and you walked away." "I was 18, Caleb said. "I didn't have rank, didn't have pull, I tried." "Not hard enough." Her voice was sharp, cutting. "My father's dead because men like Holland get away with it. My brother's gone because no one stood up to him. And you," she pointed at him, her hand shaking. "You had a chance, and you chose yourself." Caleb didn't argue. He just sat there, taking it, because she was right. "Why are you here?" Nora demanded. "Why buy this place?" "I didn't know it was yours. I just saw land going for nothing and figured something was wrong." He met her eyes. "But now I know, and I'm not walking away this time." "Why guilt?" She laughed bitterly. "You think saving me makes up for what you didn't do." "No," Caleb stood, his voice steady, "but it's a start." Nora stared at him, her anger warring with something else. Exhaustion, maybe, or the faint, dangerous edge of hope. "You can hate me," Caleb said quietly. "I've earned it, but I'm not letting Holland take this place, and I'm not letting those men come back for you." "You think you can stop him? He owns half the county." "Maybe," Caleb picked up his hat from the table, "but I'm not 18 anymore, and I'm done keeping my mouth shut." Nora didn't respond. She just watched him, her expression unreadable. Outside, the sun was sinking lower, casting long shadows across the valley. And on the ridge, the rider was still there, a dark silhouette against the dying light. Watching. Waiting. The riders came at dusk. Caleb saw the dust first, rising from the road like smoke. 3 horses, moving slow and deliberate. He was outside checking the fence line when he spotted them, and his hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip. Inside the house, Nora stood at the window, her face pale. "It's them." Caleb stepped onto the porch, positioning himself between the house and the approaching riders. He didn't draw his gun, but his hand stayed close. The 3 men reined in about 20 yards out. The one in the middle was older, heavy-set, with a badge pinned to his vest. The other two were younger, hired guns, by the look of them, hard eyes and easy postures, hands resting on their thighs near their weapons. The man with the badge smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You must be the fellow who bought this place," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Name's Wade Garrett. I'm the deputy in these parts." Caleb didn't move. "Caleb's Thorne." "Mr. Thorne, welcome to the county." Garrett shifted in his saddle, his gaze flicking toward the house. "I hear you got yourself a bargain, $1 for 200 acres. That's real lucky." "Seemed fair." "Did it now?" Garrett's smile widened. "Thing is, there's some complications with this property, legal matters that need sorting out." "Deed's legal, bought it at public auction." "Oh, the deed's fine," Garrett said. "It's what came with it that's the issue." He nodded toward the house. "The woman in there, Miss Brennan, she's technically part of the estate assets. We were supposed to handle her placement after the sale." Caleb's jaw tightened. "She's not an asset, she's a person. Legally speaking, she's a dependent with no kin, no means, and no husband. That makes her a ward of the county." Garrett's tone was patient, like he was explaining something simple to a child. "We're just here to collect her and take her somewhere appropriate." "She's not going anywhere." The two younger men exchanged glances. One of them, a wiry kid with a scar across his cheek, let his hand drop closer to his gun. Garrett held up a hand, still smiling. "No. Mr. Thorne, let's not make this difficult. I understand you might feel protective. It's a natural instinct. But this is a legal matter, and I've got the authority to enforce it." "Show me the paperwork." Garrett's smile faltered just slightly. "Excuse me. You're saying it's legal. Show me the court order." There was a pause. The wind moved through the valley, rattling the dry grass. "I don't need to show you anything," Garrett said, his voice cooling. "I'm a sworn deputy, and I'm telling you how it is. And I'm a landowner with a legal deed, and I'm telling you she stays." The scarred kid shifted in his saddle. "You want us to just take her, Wade?" Garrett raised a hand again, eyes still locked on Caleb. "You're making a mistake, Thorne. Henry Holland has an interest in this property. He's got lawyers and he's got friends. You're just some drifter who got lucky at an auction. You really want to go up against that?" "Holland," Caleb said the name like it tasted bad. "He's behind this." "Mr. Holland is a respected businessman and a war veteran," Garrett said. "He tried to help the Brennans when they couldn't keep up with their debts. It's not his fault they failed." "He forged documents," Caleb said, "stole their water rights, drove Thomas Brennan to kill himself." Garrett's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation. You got proof?" "I know what he did during the war. I saw it." "The war's over, Thorne, and old stories don't mean much without evidence." Garrett gathered his reins. "I'll give you 1 day to think it over. Tomorrow we come back, and Miss Brennan comes with us. If you're smart, you'll have her ready." "And if I'm not?" Garrett's smile returned, cold and thin. "Then we'll handle it the hard way." He turned his horse and rode off, the other two following. They didn't hurry, didn't look back, just rode away slow and confident, like men who knew they'd already won. Caleb watched them go until they disappeared over the ridge. His hand was still on his gun, knuckles white. Behind him, the door creaked open. Nora stepped out onto the porch, her arms wrapped around herself. "They'll come back," she said quietly, "and they'll bring more men." "I know. You should leave, take your dollar and go. This isn't your fight." Caleb turned to look at her. "It became my fight the moment I cut those ropes." "Why?" Nora's voice rose, frustration breaking through. "Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." "Because I should have stopped Holland years ago," Caleb said, "and I didn't, and your father paid for it, your brother paid for it." He met her eyes. "I'm not walking away again." Nora stared at him, something shifting in her expression, not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of belief. "Holland won't stop," she said. "He wants this land. He's wanted it since before my father died. There's copper in the hills past the North Ridge. My father found traces of it 2 years ago. Holland knows." Caleb nodded slowly. Then we've got one day to figure out how to stop him. You know this land, you know these people. Caleb gestured toward the valley. I can't fight this alone. Nora looked out at the ranch, the broken barn, the empty corral, the land her father had died trying to keep. And for the first time since Caleb had found her, something like fire flickered in her eyes. All right, she said, but if we're doing this, we do it my way. Caleb almost smiled. Deal. The sun dropped below the horizon, and the valley filled with shadow. And in the distance, from somewhere beyond the hills, came the faint sound of hoofbeats. More riders. Coming. The lantern light flickered across the table, casting long shadows on the walls. Nora spread out a rough map she'd drawn on the back of an old feed bill, the ranch, the creek, the ridgelines, and the northern hills where her father had found copper traces. Her finger traced the boundary lines. Holland doesn't just want this place, she said. He wants control of the whole valley. If he owns this ranch, he controls access to the northern range. No one can get to the copper without crossing his land. Caleb studied the map. How many ranches are left between here and town? 3, maybe 4, if you count the widow Macready's place, but she's got sons who work for Holland now. Nora's jaw tightened. He's been buying people out or running them off for 2 years. We were the last ones who wouldn't sell. And now he's got the law on his side. Garrett's been in his pocket since the war ended. Anything Holland wants, Garrett makes legal. She looked up at Caleb. You can't fight them with a gun. They'll call it murder and hang you for it. Then how? Nora hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased. My father kept records, every meeting with Holland, every forged document, every threat. He wrote it all down. She unfolded it carefully. This is his journal entry from the week before he died. He names Holland, names Garrett, names the land office clerk who changed the deed records. Caleb took the paper, reading by the dim lantern light. The handwriting was shaky but clear, detailing dates, amounts, exact words spoken. It was damning. Why didn't you use this before? He asked. I tried, took it to the sheriff. He said it was hearsay, that a dead man's word doesn't hold up in court. Nora's voice was bitter, said I was just a grieving daughter making accusations. But it's evidence. Not here, not in this county. Caleb folded the paper carefully and handed it back. Then we take it somewhere else, to the territorial judge or the federal marshal. The nearest federal marshal is 3 days' ride. Holland will have us before we make it halfway. Caleb sat back, thinking. The lantern hissed softly. What about your neighbors? He asked. The other ranchers, would they stand with you? Nora shook her head. They're scared. Holland's made examples out of people who crossed him, and they've got families to protect. She paused. But there's one man, Tom Wardell. He owns the place just south of here. He and my father were friends. He helped us bring in the hay the last 2 summers. Would he testify? Maybe if he thought it would matter. Nora looked down at the map again. But he's got 3 kids and a wife. Asking him to go up against Holland is asking him to risk everything. Caleb nodded slowly. He understood that. He'd been that man once, weighing silence against danger and choosing safety. The silence stretched between them. So here's the question. If you were sitting where Caleb is right now, would you ask a man with a family to risk everything? Or would you find another way, maybe one that costs you more? Take a breath, pour yourself a drink, think about that. And if you're still with me, tap subscribe so you don't miss how this plays out. Nora stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark valley. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. You could still leave, sell the deed back to Holland, take whatever he offers. He'd probably pay you just to go away quietly. I'm not selling. Why? She turned to face him. You didn't know my father. You didn't know Daniel. This isn't your family, isn't your home. Caleb stood, the chair scraping back. Because I've spent 10 years trying to forget that I walked away once, trying to tell myself it didn't matter, that one man couldn't make a difference. He crossed to the window, standing beside her. But it did matter, and I can make a difference, maybe not a big one, but enough. Nora studied his face in the dim light. You really think we can stop him? I think we can try. She looked at him for a long moment, and something in her expression softened, just barely, like ice beginning to crack. My father used to say that the land doesn't care who owns the deed, she said. It just cares who takes care of it. She glanced back at the map on the table. He loved this place, not because it was his, but because it was good. Clean water, good grass, enough space for things to grow. It still is, Caleb said. Yeah, Nora's voice was quiet. It is. Outside, the wind moved through the valley, carrying the smell of sage and creek water. The night was still, the stars bright overhead. And for the first time since Caleb had found her, Nora didn't look like she was holding herself together by will alone. She just looked tired, human. Get some rest, Caleb said. I'll keep watch tonight. Nora nodded, but she didn't move right away. Caleb. Yes. Thank you, the words came slowly, like they cost her something, for not leaving. Caleb met her eyes. I'm not going anywhere. She turned and went back inside, her footsteps soft on the old boards. Caleb stayed at the window, watching the dark hills. Somewhere out there, Holland's men were planning. Garrett was preparing, and the law, such as it was on their side. But Caleb had something they didn't. He had a reason to fight that went deeper than land or money or power. He had a chance to do the right thing. Finally, dawn came cold and clear. Caleb was saddling his horse when he heard riders approaching, not from the road, but from the south. He drew his rifle from the saddle scabbard and moved to the corner of the barn. But the man who rode into the yard wasn't Garrett. It was an older rancher, weathered and lean, with a gray beard and kind eyes. Behind him rode two younger men, hands by the look of them. The older man raised his hand in greeting. You Thorn. Caleb lowered the rifle slightly. I am. Tom Wardell, I own the spread south of here. He nodded toward the house. Nora inside. She is. Wardell dismounted slowly, like his joints ached. Heard what happened. Heard Garrett came by yesterday. He glanced at the two men with him. Figured you might need a hand. Caleb stared. You're risking a lot coming here. Yeah, Wardell smiled, but it was a sad smile. I am, but Tom Brennan was my friend, and I didn't stand up for him when I should have. He met Caleb's eyes, not making that mistake twice. The door opened, and Nora stepped out onto the porch. When she saw Wardell, her expression shifted, surprise, then something close to relief. Tom. Nora, Wardell tipped his hat. Thought you might need some witnesses, legal ones. Before Nora could respond, more riders appeared, this time from the east. Caleb tensed, but Wardell just nodded. That'll be the Macready boys, he said, and probably old Jansen from the North Ridge. Sure enough, 4 more men rode into the yard, ranchers and hands, all of them armed, all of them watching the road. One of them, a young man with red hair, grinned at Caleb. Heard you bought this place for $1, that true? It is. Hell of a bargain, the young man dismounted. Name's Billy Macready. My ma said if we're gonna live in this valley, we might as well make it worth living in. Caleb looked around at the gathered men, 8 of them now, counting himself. Not an army, but enough. Wardell stepped closer, lowering his voice. Garrett's on his way, probably bringing 6 or 7 men. But if we stand together, make it clear this isn't just you and Nora, that it's all of us, he'll think twice about starting something. And Holland. Holland's a coward, Wardell said. He hides behind the law because he can't fight his own battles. You take away his cover, he's got nothing. Nora came down from the porch, holding her father's journal. We've got evidence, written records of everything Holland did, if we can get it to the territorial judge. We will, Wardell said. I'll ride with you, so will Jansen. We'll make sure it gets there. They didn't have to wait long. Garrett arrived an hour later, riding at the head of a group of 7 men. But when he crested the rise and saw the gathered ranchers standing in the yard, his expression shifted. He reined in his horse 30 yards out. "Wardell," he called, "this doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," Wardell replied. His voice was calm, steady. "This valley's been bleeding long enough. Holland's been stealing land and calling it legal, and you've been helping him. We are done with it." Garrett's face darkened. "You're interfering with county business." "You're interfering with justice," Nora said, stepping forward. She held up the journal. "This is my father's record of every crime Holland committed, every forged document, every threat, every bribe." She looked at Garrett, "including the ones he paid you." The scarred kid behind Garrett shifted nervously. "Wade." "Shut up." Garrett's hand moved toward his gun. But Wardell and the others moved too, rifles coming up, not pointing, just ready. The message was clear. Garrett's jaw worked. His eyes flicked from Caleb to Nora to the line of ranchers standing with them. He was outgunned, outnumbered, and for the first time, outsmarted. "This isn't over," Garrett said. "Yes," Caleb said quietly, "it is." Garrett stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned his horse and rode away, his men following. They didn't look back. 3 weeks later, Caleb stood on the ridge above the ranch, watching the sun set over the valley. The barn roof was repaired. The corral had new posts. Smoke rose from the chimney of the house, carrying the smell of cooking food. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Nora climbed the ridge slowly, carrying 2 tin cups. She handed one to him. "Coffee," she said. "Thought you might need it." Caleb took it, grateful. "Thanks." They stood in silence for a while, watching the light fade. "Wardell got word today," Nora said. "The territorial judge issued a warrant for Holland's arrest. Garrett too." She paused. "They're both in custody." Caleb nodded. It was over, really over. "What will you do now?" Nora asked. "I bought a ranch," Caleb said. "Figured I'd try running it." Nora smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. "You'll need help. Land like this doesn't run itself." "I know." "I could stay," she said carefully. "If you wanted, work for wages like any hand." Caleb looked at her. "I'd like that." Nora's smile widened just slightly. "Good." They stood there on the ridge as the stars began to appear. 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of injustice and chosen to build something better. The valley stretched out below them, quiet and still, waiting for morning. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not because the world was fair or because justice always won, but because sometimes, when people stood together, they could make it a little more right. He kept Nora's father's journal on the mantel, next to a photograph of Thomas Brennan standing in front of the barn, smiling. A reminder of what silence costs and what courage can win back.